Hello everybody, Walters954 here. We have got another live stream for you, and this is a follow-up or part 2 of the recipe selector. So while I get things set up here, make sure to hit like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of these live streams or any of the videos that I produce. Or I guess, is it really produce or is it just make? I don't know, but yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you find interesting, and if there's anything that you would like to see me create or go over. I'm just doing a double check, making sure the stream is live. So sit back. Ooh, sounds like it's working there. Sit back and enjoy the show as we go along. So where we last left off, it's been a couple of weeks because I've just been lazy studying for some certs and some other stuff, so nothing major there. But we last left off on part 1, and it was really the creation of this food selection tool. So basically, every week, me and my fiance, we meal prep, and it sometimes become a challenge to select what we want to eat. So we're building something in Salesforce to solve that problem. Please check out part 1. I'll link to it somewhere, or it'll be, in the description, but that's the gist of it. And I'll give you a quick tour just to remind everybody of what we kind of did for the first one. So we created this app of recipes. There may be more additional tabs that get added onto this app. We created an object called recipe, which holds the different recipes that we like to create. Added a few fields on there. And I'm getting a phone call. Not going to answer that. Added a few fields on here, and let's see a more filled out one. Let's try Mama's Meatloaf. There we go. So added a few fields. So we got the description, the website where it comes from, and some directions on here on what we actually want to create for this, or how to actually create it. So we got the ingredients and the different directions. So once we actually pick one of these, we will know how to create it, which is perfect there. So what I want to do for this video, and it depends on how long it will run, but really what we want to start to decide from is like the distinctions of the different types of food that we eat, because it's not only that we meal prep for dinner, we also meal prep for lunch, and then there is technically sides that go along with each of those different aspects of meal prepping. So we want to be able to decide between all of those different foods, and then hopefully add in more food options into our Salesforce org. And super special, maybe stick around to the end, we may actually start on the flow that will do the random selection for this. But to get things rolling here, let's just kind of take a look at what are the technical pieces that we want to get done with this. So some pieces that we didn't get done before was doing a random selection. Let's move that down, and doing cost calculations. Let's continue to move those down even if we are not going to be working on those today, just as a reminder so we don't forget it. Let's clean this up here. So what we want to make sure to do is probably do record types for food types. That makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. We want to import more food options or more recipes, and then the random selection process is going to be started with the flow, so we'll leave that one on here. And yeah, we'll actually, does the recipe have sides? This is a weird one because some of the things that we make, we may not make a side for it, so that well, we'll get into that. One of the other things that took so long and just being lazy is getting this list or Excel sheet going of what we like to make and the different types that we like to, different types of food that we like to make. So meatloaf was on there, lemon pepper chicken, and these are all of the dinner types. Scroll down a little bit, we can see that here are some of the lunch types that we like to make. Lots of chicken there. And then some of the sides. And I just thought of a side, mashed potatoes. If you have a favorite dish, dinner, side, whatever, definitely leave it in the comments down below. I will add it onto the list and try to make it. Even better if you have a some sort of website or something that shows you the instructions, because that'll help us out when we do these uploads. So we have mashed potatoes, and then we had baked potatoes. That's also a side in here. So I'm not going to fill out all of the other information just for the sake of time. I'll go back and do that. Maybe we'll have a follow-up video that shows how to update records instead of inserting them, or maybe even doing an upsert. But for this instance, I'm going to be inserting some of these just to show you how to use the data loader and how to query fields for the record types, which makes it a lot easier for you to do uploads in this fashion. So let's get started. We're going to go back on our record because we don't have those types that we've been looking for. You know, we talked about, hey, we have types that are sides, types that are lunch, types that are dinner, but those types are not defined anywhere inside of our recipes object. So what we're going to do is head over into the object, and it looks like I'm already on the record types, and just add a new record type. And the reason we are doing record type is because we want to have different fields for the different layouts that exist. And that's one easy way of deciding if you're going to have record types. There are other ways to decide if you want to have record types, but that's an easy way of saying if you want different page layouts for the different things that you're viewing, then go ahead and do record types. And the same things with pick list values. If you want to have different pick list values for the different types of records that you have, then go ahead and use a record type for that. I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of these. So we added in dinner. Let's do lunch. Make sure it's active, enabled for all the profiles. And skip through everything here. You know, as you're going through, you should be making sure that everything's for the correct profile and you're using the correct page layouts. But since this is just for demo purposes, I'm kind of flying through all of these and just making sure that, you know, you guys get the general understanding of what's going on here. One other thing, I didn't mean to go back there, but something to check just to make sure your record types are active. So I refresh the page. I'm going to add a new recipe. And now we're seeing the selection in here, dinner, lunch, and sides. So we can come in, do dinner, enter in the information. So baked fish, put in the description, all that good stuff. I like baked fish, so is it a 5 or a 4? I guess if I have to question it, then it's a 4, but baked fish is good. And there we have it. You know, we could go in and enter in all of this information one by one, but nobody wants to do that, especially with this long list of 30 records. I don't want to do it. So imagine if this was like 50, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 records. So this is where the data loader comes into play. We want to use the data loader to upload bulk information inside of Salesforce. This is different from just going in and maybe doing it manually. And there are multiple ways of importing information in Salesforce. There's the data import wizard, which is a Salesforce built-in feature. We'll go to it really quickly. It's a Salesforce built-in data import tool that you can use. It's very good for simple uploads, and this one is technically a simple upload. You know, we come into custom object, select our recipes, and go through it there. We'd have to add a new record, put our CSV, what are we matching by, the name, blah blah blah. But the data import wizard is limited in some aspects of the overall operations. There's also tools like dataloader.io, which we may end up using, or we might use the Salesforce data loader. I think we'll use the Salesforce data loader just because I think more admins may be trying to learn that a little bit more than dataloader.io, just because dataloader.io has some restrictions. You know, you can only do 10,000 records per month. This is good for, in this case, for me, when I'm only doing 50 records, but it can really put you in a bind if you rely on it fully, and it kind of bites you in the butt when you can't upload more records and you have to pay for it. So let's stick with the data loader, which has no restrictions on it in terms of being able to, like an upload limit, and it has a little bit more features and capabilities instead of the data import wizard. So we have our food record types. Let's cross this off. How do I do a strike through? Well, it should be on this top bar. The one other thing is I want to go back and update these old records just to have the record type. Where's the record type? Come on. Is my caching on again? I thought I dealt with this before. Or maybe I think the value is just not on the record. So what I'm looking for here is there should be a field called record type. It's not on here on the page layout. So let's go and do some page layout updates. Go over to record type. It just wasn't on the field or wasn't on the page. Add it to over here. And then let's do a quick refresh to make sure that the record type is on the page. Come on, Salesforce, you can do it. There we go. Okay, so showing, I hate this layout right now. Let's move it up. Should split some of these out. The date was last made, description things. Okay, cool. So now let's go back, do some general updating. Or actually, let's do an upsert. I think we can get away with it with these little amount of fields. So if you didn't know, an upsert is an insert and an update at the same time. So if the record ID exists in the file, then it will do an update. If the record ID does not exist in the file, then it will do an insert. So let's go over what that is like. For our upload, we're going to need a couple things to make it actually work. One thing is if we are looking to do an update, we're going to need the Salesforce ID. So this just says meatloaf. And so since we have our values that exist, we can come into Mama's Meatloaf, copy that, go back to our file here, and I'll slow that down. I know that was a little fast. So you can get the record ID from the top of the URL. That's these last couple digits in between the record name and view. And I also want to copy the name just because if we do an update, it's going to update that name. Okay, let's go back to our recipes and go to lemon pepper chicken. What I'm not doing here is updating the record type in here. So let's go ahead and copy the ID. Let's do lemon pepper chicken. And then we have baked fish as the last one. It already has a record ID, or sorry, it already has a good name and the record type, which is fine. But let's go ahead and add in the Salesforce ID into this column so that it'll do the correct update. So step one, since we have record types, we need to add in the record type ID. I guess it's step two since we already did our regular IDs. But so, since we have record types, it's required now on all of the fields. So we're going to need to add in those record types IDs. And you may be thinking, well, where the heck do I get the record type IDs from? Well, there's a couple different ways to find that. You can go to the record type tab on the object, click on dinner or click on any other record types you have. And one of these IDs in here is actually the record type ID. I can never remember if it's this one or if it's this one. And it takes me a while to figure it out. I just do trial and error if I'm doing it this way. Another way is to create a formula field on the actual record itself to get the record type ID. And you do something like record type ID. And this isn't, let's say, the best practice just because it's adding an extra field that's kind of useless or only useful in querying situations or like data upload situations. But you can go to record type, do record type ID, put that in there. Sure, everybody can see it. Why not? And this is useful now, let's say like we run a report or we want to see the record type ID somewhere else. And hey, Jonathan, coming out from Brazil. Thank you so much for hanging out. Much appreciated. And yeah, we'll just be moving on here. Please feel free to ask any questions. So now we can see we have the record type ID in our record, but this one's only for dinner. If we needed to find lunch, we would need to create a lunch record, get the ID, and so on and so forth. It's not very scalable if we have like 30 different record types. Kind of annoying to do that. Could run our report, but then all of the record types needed to exist beforehand. So, being the developer that I am, you can actually query the record type IDs inside of the developer console. So let's close this out, and if all of you saw my blog post, you can right click the developer console, go to show as tab, and then now it is a Chrome tab, so we can put it in there. And don't be afraid, we're not going to write any complicated queries. It's going to be fairly simple, I would think. So we're going to come down into the query selector, and we are going to say select ID, comma, name. I think it's name. It might be developer name. I got to remember this stuff. From recipe, the object we need. I hope I spelled that right. Looks like it. Or sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong thing. We actually need to query the record type, where the S object type is recipe. So there's a table called record types here, and that's what we're searching. And let's actually do that first. Let's just see what record types we get returned back. And we can see here that we have the IDs, we have the names, but we have some other ones that we're not familiar with. We know these, dinner, side, and the other ones we like, but we don't know the other ones. So if we type in S object, is it S object name? S object type. There we go. Now we can see a new column got added, and here are the ones, the first three are the ones for recipe, the next three are the ones for knowledge and cases. So this is just one way of finding the record type IDs, and then let's add back in our where clause. Now it should be filtered down, but I spelled something wrong. There we go. And now we can see everything we need here, and there are ways of like exporting these rows if you use other tools. So, but for me, I am going to head back over into our sheet here, and then what I'm going to do is use a Vlookup because I guess they're all in order. All right. Yeah, let's go over the Vlookup because this is also something good that a lot of admins and developers will need to know. How to use Excel, or in this case Google Sheets, how to use Vlookups. So what I'm going to do is copy all of these record type IDs. Did I not copy? Come here. Okay. Lunch, put them over in here. Generally you'd just like export these and put them in. Okay, cool. We're also going to run into an issue with our columns, but I'll go over that in a second. Now we're going to use a Vlookup. And a Vlookup, all that really does is it says, if I have this value here, I want you to match that value in another section or in another place, and then return a different value next to it. So in this case, I want to match the whatever type I have, so it's dinner, and give me back the ID that corresponds to dinner. It's a map, it's a lookup, a dictionary, whatever you want to call it, but it's just a reference. Dinner equals this specific record on or this specific cell in the next row. So let's get cracking with our wizardry here. Do the equal sign, Vlookup. The search key, and you can see here that it gives you an example and all the things that you're going to be looking for. So the search key, I hope I get this right the first time. The search key is the value that we are looking for. And in this case, it's going to be dinner. We're looking for that, that cell in this particular row. Then we are looking for the range, and these are the values that we want to look through. And it's actually all of the values that we want to look through. So we want to look through all of these values and, you know, as a whole, not separately. You know, if this was another table, we'd be looking through all of the tables, but we want to include everything so that when we do the next part of selecting the next piece, it will actually find the values, the record type values that we're looking for. So I'm going to do another comma, and then the index is the number of times we want to go over. I gotta make sure about that. Vertical lookups, search up and down the columns. The index of a value to be returned based on the table that we're going with. So let's try 1 and see what happens. Close this out, hit enter, and 1 was not. So we know that it worked because there's a value in here, but I didn't know if it started at 0 for an index or 1. If we change this to 2, we can see that the record type ID over here has come back with the correct one, and we can see that these all look the same. Are these all the same? No. B, G, and like an L here. So we can see that all of these B1s, or this B1 has come back. And if we drag this down, what we hope to see is, hey, this will just automatically figure itself out and populate the values. But we're not seeing that. We're wondering, like, hey, what gives here? So what happened here is that, let me put some proper columns. Here we go. For anybody joining in halfway and it's like, what the heck are we doing? This isn't Salesforce, but we can see here that this is looking at the range of F2 to G4. And what we want to do when this moves down, we want to look at this one and then go through the same cells and range that we have over here. But when we look at this, this goes down, the B3, let me see if it'll go out. B3 goes down, but what also shoots down is this, the selection of our actual table itself. So it's not the correct selection anymore. It starts to move down because we did the dragging feature inside of, this happens in Excel and in Google Sheets. We can drag down to copy cells, but it also copies, it doesn't copy exact references, it copies relative references. I think that's what it's technically called. Anyways, to solve this, what we need to do is put $signs between all of our table values so that they become absolute values. I'm just going to call it absolute values. It's basically so that they don't move. So now when we look, the first column value, our search key is moving, but our tables, the reference that we're using, is not moving. So now we're on like B10, B11, we're continuing to move over here and going down. So that worked out great. Let's continue to go down a little bit more and we should see some changes. We see it's EB for the last dinner one, EG going down, and then E, I'm assuming that's an L since they sound lowercase. So that looks good there. We have our record type IDs, which is something that was required for our insert of recipes now that we added a new recipe in here. And then we have our IDs for the existing ones. And what is actually cool is that type really doesn't matter anymore because our record type ID is the actual type. That's the reference that it's using. The last thing we have to do before we move this to the data loader and get it in a CSV is just remove these erroneous values. So let's say we go ahead and delete this table here. It's gonna remove our reference because this is now referencing an empty spot in our table. So let's put that back. And how you kind of solve this is to copy all of the cells. You can copy the whole column and do a paste values only. So now when we click on this, you can see that the formula is gone, but the values have stayed. So then we can come over here and delete these, clean up all our stuff. So this looks good. Now I'm going to download this as a CSV because our Salesforce data loader takes CSVs. Bring our data loader up. I should already be logged in. I said we were doing an insert at first, but now that we are doing an upsert, let's go ahead and hit that. And we're going to look for our objects, which is recipe. Let's browse. I'm selecting my food options here. I'm bringing it away because I don't know what I have saved on here. Okay, all good stuff. You guys can see some wedding plans too. So yeah, all normal stuff. Food options there. So let's go ahead and select next. It's saying how many records that we found. It's looking for the field that we are going to basically do our matching on. So since this is an upsert, we want to match based on the ID field. If there's no ID, then we're going to do an insert. If we had external IDs, we could do a external ID update, which is, I guess, a video for another time. It's kind of cool, but we'll just go ahead. Since we don't have a mapping, I'm going to create a mapping, do auto match, and we see that all of these fields filled in. Type didn't get filled in because type is not actually a field on our record itself. Type is just something that we used in our CSV to have a friendly name for the ID reference when we were doing our update into our matching for the IDs of the record type IDs. So let's go ahead and hit next. Go through, sure, I can output there, and it's saying, hey, you're about to change stuff in your org. Are you sure you want to do that? And we're going to say heck yes. I have the batch size set to 1. What is wrong with me? It's probably doing something weird. Anyways, we have all successes, so no need to view that. Just before I leave, let me make sure to switch this batch size to 200 before I forget again. And now if we go back into our recipes object, we should see a bunch of other stuff in here, which is amazing. We have like all of our new food options in here, exactly what we wanted. If we go to baked fish, we can see that, well, I think we already put the record type in there. So let's go try to find our existing ones and see if it put a record type in here, and it did. So Mama's Meatloaf did not have a record type before, and it has a record type now, which is great. Okay, so we have imported all of our other food options. Let's go ahead and, where was it? Formatting. I need to learn the shortcut. Alt-Shift-5, really? Okay. So we have done the all the beginning pieces, at least enough to have our different recipe selections. So I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes starting the flow for this. So if you want to stick around for that, I'm actually going to end the stream right now and spin back up. So just so we can have a clean break between when we start messing around with this flow stuff, because I know I'm going to hit a breaking point with that. But if you guys are enjoying this stream and you're enjoying this content, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Definitely leave comments down in the chat. If you're here live on the live stream, and make sure to let me know on the comments different food options we should try and get added into our recipe selection. We're always looking for new stuff, especially for lunch, because as you can see, it's a lot of chicken and we need to mix it up. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. The stream will be spinning up in just a moment. We'll focus on flows, and we can continue on working on this recipe selector. Thank you all so much.